Hi everyone and welcome. I feel like the first quarter of the year has really flown by, and that's why I thought it would be a nice idea to have a little bit of a check-in and see how I fared with reading so far. So I will share some general stats. I'm a scientist and it's kind of a package deal. If you love science, you're probably going to love statistics as well, but I will try to make it as interesting as possible for you. And I will also go over the goals that I set up for myself in the beginning of this year and see how good on track I am. I will probably have to adjust some of them as well. Towards the end of the video, I will also talk a little bit about Booktube, because I made my channel at the end of last year, so this is basically also the first quarter that I'm here as a booktuber, and I might want to change some things in the future, try something out, so that will be mentioned towards the end of the video. Now, as you have probably gathered by now, this is going to be a pretty general video, but I do have two more specific ones planned. Either this week or next week they will go up. The first one is where I will rank all the books that I read in winter. Winter for me is January, February, March, so basically the first quarter of the year. And then the second video is where I talk about all the series that I'm currently in the middle of and that I really want to finish. And that was really an eye-opener, and that's also why I will have to adjust some goals, because I'm in the middle of way too many series and I want to get that number down ASAP. But for now, just the general thoughts of my reading year up to this point. So first off, I do want to mention that I'm quite happy with how I started the year. I think it was a good start of the year, both in terms of quality as in terms of quantity. In terms of quality, I enjoyed most books that I picked up. Of course, I did have some disappointments. I think that's normal if you read on a daily basis, that not everything that you pick up is going to be to your taste. But on the other hand, I do have some new all-time favorites on my list now, so I'm quite happy with that, as well as some surprises that I didn't know I was going to enjoy as much as I did. In terms of quantity, I do have a Goodreads goal. I think that's something that most people have. Even if you don't keep track of other things in regards of reading, you are going to know how many books you've read and you're maybe working towards a goal. In my case, I set my Goodreads goal at 52 books in the beginning of the year, and that was kind of my pie in the sky number. I knew that it was going to be quite hard to reach, but if I tried really hard, that it might be possible. Because last year I finished around 45 books. And some of them were graphic novels and manga, and this year I wasn't going to count those kinds of books towards my goal. So 52 books was going to be very difficult, and I didn't know if I was going to meet that number. However, I'm quite happy to report that by the end of March I actually finished 19 books. So that's a progress of 37% towards my end goal, and that also meant that I was 6 books ahead of schedule. Now, a big part of that is because of audiobooks. Last year, all of the books that I read were physical books, and then this year I discovered audiobooks around the same time that I started my channel, and I'm really happy with that. I'm somebody who has to drive to work and back home for a pretty long while. I'm around 10 hours a week in my car, and I used to listen to music, but it always felt like wasted time, like there was something more productive that I could be doing or something more fun. So when I discovered audiobooks and actually loved them and started listening to them when I was in the car, that was really a very positive thing in my life that happened. And of course, those numbers do add up. 10 hours a week, that's sometimes an entire book, especially if you listen to 1.5, 2 times speed, as I do, somewhere in between of those two numbers. So yes, that does add up to my end number. And what I did want to do was not neglect my physical reads. This was something that I didn't really set up at the beginning of the year as a goal, because as I said, I didn't even know that I was going to like audiobooks. But when I started noticing that I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, I wanted to make sure that I was still reading physically. Now, to be clear, I don't think that one is better than the other. You read because you enjoy yourself, and if you like audiobooks, if you like physical books, both are the same for me. There's not one that is better than the other. But the reason why I didn't want to neglect my physical reads is because most of the time when I listen to the audiobook, that's when I'm doing something else. So my free time remains pretty much open. So if I wasn't going to read physical books, that most of the time meant that I was going to stare at a screen, either at my cell phone or my laptop. And I think we've all been in that situation where all of a sudden 2 hours have passed and you have just swiped Twitter. And that, again, feels like wasted time. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to continue physical books as well. And when I looked at the numbers, I was actually very pleasantly surprised, because it couldn't have been more in the middle. By the end of March, I read 8 books physically, 8 books I listened to on audiobook, and then 3 was kind of a mix between the two. So either a part on audio and a part physically, or I did the immersive reading thing, where you listen to the audiobook and at the same time you read the physical book. So really, right in the middle, very glad with that, and I hope I can keep that up until the end of the year. When we then look at page count, and to be honest, this is something that I don't really care about that much, because for me it's about the amount of stories that I consume, and whether or not that's a long story doesn't really matter that much for me, but I do find it interesting to look at and to see if I read more or less in a certain period of the year. So if you look at the first 3 months of the year, I read a total of 8,670-ish books, so that leads up to an average of 460-ish pages per book, which is quite logical if you read a lot of fantasy, that 500 pages is about the average length of a book. When we then look again at physical versus audio, this is again quite right in the middle, so happy with that. The shortest book that I read was The Deep, and I think that was around 160 pages, and the longest book that I read was Ship of Destiny, which is almost 800 pages long. And which is quite funny, both of those I read through audiobook. One of the goals that I had for this year was also to pick up some non-fantasy books, because in 2020 all of the books that I read were fantasy. Now I did make quite clear that I wasn't going to go towards 50-50. Fantasy is something that I love and I still want to read that predominantly, but I just wanted to try some other genres and age ranges as well. And of the 19 books that I read this year, 3 of them were not fantasy. One was historical fiction, The Half-Drowned King. One was contemporary fiction with a little bit of horror and dystopian settings as well. That was Tender as the Flesh. And the last one that I read was Red Rising, which is a sci-fi. That one I read as a part of my Broaden My Horizon series, where I pick a genre or an age range and then read 5 books that count towards that. And then at the end, I decide whether or not that genre or age range is something for me. So having read only 1 out of 5 sci-fi books that I want to read this year, because I really want to wrap up the sci-fi genre in 2021, I'm a little bit behind, so I really need to kind of catch up in that regard, and I am going to try to pick up my second sci-fi book next month. When we then look at authors, I'm actually quite surprised to see that of the 19 books that I've read, 3 of them were by authors that I've read something of before, and 16 authors were actually new to me. Of those 16, 2 were debut authors, and I read their new releases. The first one is The Hall of Smoke by H.M. Long, and the other one was The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. And again, that's something that I want to focus on a little bit more this year, to read more new releases, and then more specifically from debut authors. What I was also surprised by is that of the 19 authors that I've actually read, 12 of them were female, and only 7 were male. Because of course the fantasy genre in general is quite occupied by male authors, that was something that I wasn't expecting, and I'm quite glad that that turned out without even trying. One of the male authors is the member of the trans community, and he also wrote an Own Voices book, so I'm quite happy that that's one of the list as well, and that was the story of Silence by Alex Myers. Now, in terms of BIPOC authors, or authors that are part of a marginalized group, I didn't really count that. That's something that I definitely want to pay attention to towards the rest of the year and my reading career in general. But I recently saw a tweet of a person that I thought was a BIPOC author, but he actually said that he didn't consider himself as such. He didn't consider himself to be part of a marginalized group, so he didn't want other people to identify him as that either. And of course, I completely respect that. And I also think that it might be a little bit strange and even degrading to put authors in certain boxes, see what ticks off and stuff like that. So I do want to read more from people who are not privileged like I am or like some other people are in the author community, but I'm not going to count that, and I'm not going to do statistics on that either, because it doesn't really feel right for me. In the beginning of the year, I actually made 2 TBR videos. One was the 15 series that I wanted to start in 2021, and the other one was the 15 standalones that I wanted to give a try this year. Now, 15, especially for series, is an impossible task, and I see that now. Because of course I am going to notice new series that I pick up, which was the case, and I also had some unfinished series from 2020 that I wanted to finish this year as well. So in this aspect, I definitely need to rearrange some stuff. But when we first look at the standalones, I actually did pretty well. Of the 15 standalones, at the time I said that I wanted to finish at least 10. Because last year I only read 4 standalones, and my goal for this year was to increase that number at least to 10 standalones for this year. But in this first quarter I already read 8. So that goal is definitely going to be okay. I'm going to meet it, and I'm quite happy with that. Of the 8 books that I read, 5 were on my TBR list, but one of the 3 that were not on there were also by Patricia McKillop. So that book was The Forgotten Beasts of Eld, and I actually had the Alphabet of Thorn by Patricia McKillop on my TBR list. So for me, The Forgotten Beasts of Eld also counts because I just wanted to try this author, and if that's by one book by her or another, I don't really care. So in the end, 6 out of the 8 books were on the list, and I'm glad with that. One of those books, by the way, Hall of Smoke, actually is going to have a sequel next year, so maybe it really doesn't count because, well, it's going to have a sequel, but it can definitely be read as a standalone, and at the time I thought that it was a standalone, so I'm just going to count it as that. So for the standalones, I'm going to be in the clear. I can even ramp up my goal towards 15 standalones and still be fine, I think, because a lot of the standalones on the list I actually already own and I'm going to read as part of a buddy read or something else, so standalones, fine. When we then look at series, I actually did a lot worse. So I had 9 unfinished series that I started in 2020 and that I wanted to finish in 2021. And that's still a goal of mine, but up until this point I did terrible. So of those 9, I DNF'd one, Wheel of Time. I already explained a lot of times why I'm DNFing it. Basically, I'm not enjoying it enough to finish another 10 books in that series. Then I finished 2, the Liveship Trilogy by Robin Hobb and the Saga of the Light Isles by Juliette Marillier. But for the other 6 books, I barely made any progress, so that's my top priority at this point. By the end of this year, all of those 6 need to be finished. When I then look at my TBR list of 15 books that I wanted to start this year, or series that I wanted to start this year, I also did quite badly. In general, I started 4, but I finished none. However, 1, the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, I am going to finish this month, and that's definitely going to be crossed off the list because I am already halfway through the last book, and we are going to have an online meetup over at Leslie's channel, The Nerdy Narrative, so that's definitely going to happen. However, I also added 5 series to the list that weren't on my TBR list. So 5 series that I started that I wasn't planning to do so. And again, I didn't finish any of those. I barely made any progress. For most of them, I just read the first book. So that's a big problem because at this point I have 18 unfinished series that I want to continue with. All of them I really enjoy and I want to read until the end, or at least want to read the second book. And more about that, of course, on my unfinished series video. That's going to be a separate video. But yes, it's a problem, especially because I am going to start at least 2 new series as well next month. One of them is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. That's part of a buddy read. The other one is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Quinn. This is actually a read-along that I'm co-hosting with Steve over at Steve Talks About Books and Stuff. And I will link the announcement down below if you want to join. But that's definitely happening. So not long from now, I'm going to have 20 series that I'm currently in the middle of. That's a problem, that's something that I need to prioritize, and because of that, I am not going to start any new series until I get that number below 10. Something that I don't really consider as adding to that number are new releases of the first book of a series, because I'm immediately on track if I finish that one. It's not that I'm in the middle of it or that I can read more, so that's something that I am allowed to do. But apart from that, no new series until I get my ongoing series list below 10. That also means that for my TBR list of 15 series that I want to start, I am going to make some adjustments. There are some series that I still plan to pick up this year, but there are others that I will need to move on to next year or even later than that. And for those, I will have to read a little bit. So, the series that I still hope to start somewhere this year is The Wounded Kingdom by R.J. Baker, Ashes of the Unhoned Throne by Brian Staveley, but again, this is the first in a series, so I don't really count that because it's a new release, but I did have it on the list, so just to be transparent, I am going to start that one as well. I also want to start a series by Juliette Marillier. The one that was on the list was the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, but I'm actually going to start the Bride Chronicles, but again, it's both by Juliette Marillier, so I am going to count it as being on the list. Another one that I want to start was either the Riftforce Saga by Feist or Memory, Sorrow and Thorn by Tad Williams. One of the two. I feel like they are both traditional fantasy, so I don't want to start both of them at the same time. If I finish one, I will start the other, but I don't really know at this point which one I want to start with. So if you have a clear preference, please let me know in the comments down below. Then some series that I will not be able to start this year, unfortunately, are Crossroads by Kate Elliott, A Chorus of Dragons, Echoes of the Fall by Adrian Tchaikovsky, the Devabet Trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, and then the Masquerade Trilogy. And I actually don't know the name of the author, but you will see it probably somewhere here. So those are some adjustments that I had to make my TBR livable. And I still don't know if I will be able to do the things that I now set up to do, but I do think that it's more realistic than what I had in the beginning of the year. So that's basically everything that I wanted to say that is book/reading related. But now I want to talk a little bit more about my Booktube journey, because the first video that I ever uploaded went up on the 23rd of December last year. So I'm around roughly 3 months into Booktube, and so far I'm really enjoying it a lot. At the time, I have around 29 videos up by the end of March, and I have 230 subscribers, and that's 200 more than I ever expected I was going to have, so I'm quite happy with that as well. Now, I don't really have a schedule, I'm just having fun so far, so I don't batch film videos. I film a video, I edit a video, and I upload a video probably at the same day. But that's something that I might want to change a little bit, because I also don't really have strict upload days or any schedule in that regard. I just upload whenever I have a video ready. But then recently I got sick, and that meant 2 weeks no video, because I didn't really have anything at hand. So that's why I want to try something. And again, if I don't have fun, I'm stopping with it. I don't want to feel that this is a chore, this is a hobby for me, so we'll see how it goes. But I want to try batch filming and then have 2 upload days, Wednesday and Sunday, and then possibly a third one on Saturday, but that can fluctuate. I have seen on my YouTube analytics that most people watch my channel between 8 and 10 p.m. Central European time. So I will upload at 8 p.m. and then just see what happens. Again, we will see. I'm not going to promise anything that this is going to be long term. Please let me also know in the comments down below if that's something that you find important or if you don't care about that at all. And also let me know if there's something else that you want to see on the channel. I know that somebody said that he would like it if I mention the books that I talk about in the description box down below. So that is something that I actually forgot about, that was asked of me, but I am going to do that from now on. So if there's anything else that you would like, I can definitely consider that and see if it's something that I can also implement on the channel. Now, that's everything as active part of Booktube, but of course I also watch a lot of Booktubers and have a lot of fun in that regard. I am currently subscribed to 205 Booktubers, and my watch later list is probably around the same number as that, so it's really getting out of control. But I also watch a lot of Booktube. I probably watch more Booktube than I read. Well, probably no. That's just the way it is. I watch Booktube every evening, I watch Booktube in the weekends, and even at work, if it's something that I can easily do without a lot of brain time, I either listen to an audiobook or I listen to Booktube, and I just have my phone next to me with the video and then listen to it while I'm doing something else on my PC. So doing that, I do get through a lot of videos and I like all of them, but I don't really have the time to comment on all of them. And I'm trying now, this is a new rule for me, to prioritize smaller channels and comment on smaller channels, because that's something that I think makes them happier than a big channel, or is more important for them. At least when I look at me, I'm really happy with every comment that I get, with every like that I get, with every new subscriber, because, well, I don't really get a lot of them. So it's always very special, it's always something that I take time for. And I'm not saying that bigger booktubers don't appreciate that, but it's quite normal if you have 500 comments that you're not going to spend the same amount of time to those comments than if you only have a handful. So that's probably not the best for me as wanting to grow my channel. I should probably pay more attention to bigger booktubers, but as I said, for me it's just fun and supporting the community, so that's what I am going to do for now and see if I can make it work that way, because still, most of the booktubers that I follow are quite small. So I don't even know if I have the time to comment on all of those videos either, but that's what I'm going to try to do. And then for myself, as I said, 250 subscribers at this point. At the end of March I had 230, and I'm quite happy with that number. Subscribers for me isn't something that's that important. I know that a lot of small booktubers are aiming towards that 1,000 subscriber count as a magic number, because that means you can get monetized or anything like that. And I don't really care. I don't think that I will ever ask for monetization either, even if I ever get to 1,000. I don't think I ever will. But if that would be the case, no, because then I would have pressure and it wouldn't really feel like a hobby. But it is of course a fact that the higher your subscriber count, the higher the interaction will be. And that's something that I do find very important. So because of that, of course, I would like more people to find my channel. I don't really know how I can do that other than doing what I'm already doing. So we just see how far the channel grows just by itself. I'm not going to do anything artificial to make that happen. But just know that just having 250 subscribers already is more than I ever thought I would. I'm really enjoying the interaction that I have. I thought that nobody was going to comment on my channels, so I'm really having a lot of fun and I hope that I can continue this indefinitely, basically. So that's everything that I wanted to say here. Again, please let me know if you have any goals, if you keep track of any stats that you want to share with me. Also, let me know in terms of Booktube what you would like me to change, and then I can see if it's something that I would like to do. But if it's something that doesn't really take a lot of effort, or if it's a type of video that you like to see more or less of, then just let me know and I know where I can work towards. As always, I hope that you enjoyed the video and see you next time. Bye!